The stage microphone went silent, and for the first time in America's Got Talent history, all you could hear was a 10-year-old boy's heartbeat echoing through the theater. Simon Cowell had done something no one expected. He had stopped everything. No music, no cameras, no production crew moving in the background. Just silence. And in that silence, something extraordinary was about to unfold. But how did we get here? How did a boy with a small recording device in his trembling hands manage to bring the most powerful man in entertainment to a complete standstill? This isn't just another audition story. This is the story of the moment Simon Cowell discovered that some performances aren't meant to be judged. They're meant to be felt. The day started like any other taping day at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. Hundreds of hopeful performers lined up outside, each carrying dreams bigger than themselves. Production assistants hurried through corridors with clipboards, cameras tested angles, and the familiar energy of another AGT episode filled the air. But among all those dreams and ambitions, one small figure waited quietly in the back of the line. 10-year-old Michael Chen clutched a worn leather bag against his chest like it contained the most precious treasure in the world. And in many ways it did. Inside that bag was a voice recorder, an old-fashioned one with actual cassette tapes that his grandmother had given him 6 months earlier. She told him it belonged to his mother, and that someday, when he was ready, he should listen to what was inside. Michael had been ready for weeks now, but he was terrified. His mother had passed away when he was only 4 years old, and his memories of her were like fragments of a dream, warm but incomplete, loving but distant. His father worked double shifts to keep them afloat, and his grandmother did her best to fill the maternal void, but Michael always felt like he was missing a crucial piece of himself. What Michael didn't know was that in less than 2 hours, that missing piece would not only be found but would change the heart of the toughest judge on television. The audition process moved faster than expected that day. Act after act took the stage, singers, dancers, magicians, comedians, each hoping to earn the golden ticket to the next round. Simon sat in his familiar position, center stage at the judges' table, delivering his trademark honest critiques with surgical precision. Some acts earned applause, others earned polite dismissals, but none had managed to truly capture his attention. Then, at approximately 3:47 p.m., Michael's name was called. The boy walked onto that massive stage looking impossibly small under the bright lights. His oversized button-down shirt was tucked neatly into dark jeans, and his sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floor. But it wasn't his size or his clothes that caught Simon's attention. It was the way he carried himself, like someone much older, someone who had already learned that life could be both beautiful and heartbreaking. "What's your name, and how old are you?" Simon asked in his standard opening question, though something in his voice was already different. Softer. "My name is Michael Chen, and I'm 10 years old," the boy replied, his voice barely reaching the microphone. "I'm from San Francisco, and I'm here to find something." The other judges, Heidi, Howie, and Sophia, exchanged curious glances. "Find something?" Heidi asked gently. "What are you looking for?" Michael looked down at the leather bag in his hands, then back up at the judges. "My mom. She died when I was little, and my grandma gave me this." He held up the voice recorder. "She said my mom left me messages, but I was too scared to listen to them. Until today." The theater, which moments before had been filled with the usual pre-audition chatter, fell completely silent. Camera operators instinctively zoomed in, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the production assistants in the wings stopped their bustling and turned their attention to the stage. Simon leaned forward in his chair, and for the first time in years, his expression wasn't that of a judge evaluating a performance. It was that of a human being recognizing another human being's vulnerability. "Michael," he said, his voice noticeably gentler, "are you saying you haven't listened to these recordings yet?" The boy shook his head. "I was going to listen to them at home, but then I thought, maybe she would want me to be brave. Maybe she would want me to share them with people who understand dreams, because she always told my dad she wanted to be a singer someday. That's when something unprecedented happened. Simon Cowell, the man known for his unshakable composure, raised his hand to stop the cameras. "Hold on," Simon called out, his voice carrying across the theater. "Just hold on for a moment." Production assistants looked at each other in confusion. In 15 seasons of America's Got Talent, Simon had never stopped filming during an audition. The executive producers in the control booth started communicating rapidly through their headsets, uncertain whether this was a technical issue or something else entirely. But Simon wasn't concerned with production schedules or television logistics. He was looking at a 10-year-old boy who was about to hear his deceased mother's voice for the first time, and every instinct in his body told him that this moment deserved more reverence than a reality show could typically provide. "Michael," Simon said, rising from his seat, something he almost never did during auditions. "This is a very special moment for you. Are you sure you want to do this here, in front of all these people?" The boy considered the question seriously, looking out at the audience of nearly 3,000 people, then at the cameras, then back at Simon. "My mom always said that love should be shared, not hidden. If her words can help other people feel less alone, then yes, I want to do this here." Simon felt something shift in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years of judging performances. This wasn't about entertainment anymore. This wasn't about ratings or viral moments. This was about a child's courage and a mother's love transcending death itself. "All right," Simon said, his decision made. "But we're going to do this properly." He turned to the production crew. "No cameras on Michael's face during the playback. This is his private moment with his mother, and we're just going to be witnesses to it. Subscribe and leave a comment, because what happens next will restore your faith in the power of a mother's love." Michael's hands trembled as he opened the voice recorder and inserted the first cassette tape. The device was older than he was, and it took him a moment to figure out the controls. But when he finally pressed play, the entire theater held its breath. For a few seconds, there was only the soft hiss of old tape running through the mechanism. Then, clear as if she was standing right next to him, came his mother's voice. "My beautiful Michael," the voice said, warm and melodic with just a trace of a Chinese accent. "If you're listening to this, it means you're brave enough to face tomorrow without me. I'm so proud of you for being brave." Michael's composure, which had been remarkable for a 10-year-old, finally cracked. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't try to wipe them away. He was completely absorbed in hearing the voice he had thought was lost to him forever. The recording continued. "I want you to know that every day I was with you was the most beautiful day of my life. You made me feel like the luckiest person in the world. And even though I can't be there to watch you grow up, I need you to know that I will always be proud of you. Always." In the judges section, Heidi had tears in her eyes. Sophia was holding Howie's hand. But it was Simon who surprised everyone the most. The man known for his stoic professionalism was visibly struggling to maintain his composure, his jaw tight with the effort of holding back his own emotions. But Michael wasn't finished. There were more tapes. He inserted the second cassette with hands that were steadier now, as if his mother's voice had given him strength. This recording was different, lighter, more playful. "Michael, my little sunshine." His mother's voice laughed through the old speakers. "By the time you hear this, you'll probably be taller than me. I hope you remember how we used to dance in the kitchen while I cooked dinner. I hope you remember that I used to sing you to sleep every night with that silly song about the moon and the stars." And then, impossibly, miraculously, his mother began to sing. Her voice was untrained but beautiful, filled with the kind of love that can only come from a mother singing to her child. It was a simple melody, probably something she had made up on the spot years ago, but it filled the massive theater with an intimacy that made 3,000 strangers feel like they were intruding on something sacred. That's when Simon Cowell did something that no one in that theater, or anyone watching at home, would ever forget. He stood up from his chair, walked around the judges' table, and approached the stage. Not to stop the performance, not to ask questions, but simply to be closer to this extraordinary moment of love transcending death. "Michael," Simon said softly, his voice barely audible over the recording. "What was that song? Did your mother write it for you?" Michael nodded, unable to speak through his tears. But he managed to whisper. "She called it My Little Star. She said I was her brightest light." Simon felt his professional facade completely crumble. Here was a boy who had lost the most important person in his world, yet he had found the courage to share that loss with strangers in the hope that it might bring comfort to others. Here was a love so pure and selfless that it made every cynical thought Simon had ever had about human nature seem small and petty. But there was still one more tape. Michael's hands were shaking again as he inserted the final cassette. Somehow, everyone in the theater knew that this one would be different. The boy looked up at Simon, who was now standing just a few feet away from the stage, and said, "This one is special. Grandma said Mom made it the night before she went to the hospital for the last time." The theater was so quiet that you could hear the tape mechanism clicking into place. And then, his mother's voice filled the space once more, but this time it was different. Weaker, more fragile, but somehow even more powerful. "Michael, my precious boy," the voice said, and everyone could hear that she was fighting exhaustion, fighting time itself. "I need you to know that leaving you is the hardest thing I will ever have to do. But I also need you to know that you are going to be extraordinary. Not because of anything you achieve or any prize you win, but because of who you are inside." The recording paused, and for a moment there was only the sound of labored breathing. Then she continued. "I want you to promise me something, Michael. Promise me that you will never be afraid to love people. Promise me that you will never be afraid to be kind. Promise me that when you meet someone who is sad or lonely or scared, you will remember that love is the only thing that really matters. Can you promise me that?" And there, on the stage of America's Got Talent, 10-year-old Michael Chen looked directly at Simon Cowell and said, "I promise, Mom. I promise." That's when Simon Cowell, the man who had spent decades building a reputation as the toughest critic in show business, completely broke down. He climbed onto the stage, something that had never happened in the show's history, and he wrapped his arms around this small, brave boy who had just made a promise to his dead mother in front of millions of people. And as he held Michael, Simon whispered something that only the boy could hear. "She would be so proud of you. So incredibly proud." The audience rose to their feet in a thunderous ovation, but it wasn't the kind of applause reserved for entertainment. It was the kind of applause people give when they witness something that reminds them why being human is both heartbreaking and beautiful. When Simon finally composed himself enough to return to the judges' table, he looked at his fellow judges, then at Michael, then at the audience. "In 15 years of doing this show," he said, his voice still thick with emotion, "I have never witnessed anything like what just happened here. Michael, what you just shared with us wasn't a performance. It was a gift. You gave us a gift." He paused, looking down at his hands for a moment, then back up at the boy. "Your mother was right about you being extraordinary. And I think she would want you to keep sharing that gift with the world." Simon reached for the golden buzzer without hesitation. As the golden confetti fell and the audience cheered, Michael stood on that stage holding his mother's voice recorder, surrounded by the love of 3,000 strangers who had been reminded that sometimes the most powerful performances have nothing to do with talent, and everything to do with courage. Share and subscribe so this story will never be forgotten, because what Michael taught us that day is something the world desperately needs to remember. In the weeks that followed, Michael's audition became one of the most watched AGT videos of all time. But more importantly, it changed Simon Cowell in ways that were visible to everyone who knew him. He became more patient with nervous performers, more encouraging to young contestants, and more willing to see the human being behind every act that took his stage. Michael didn't win America's Got Talent that season, but he didn't need to. He had already won something much more valuable: the knowledge that his mother's love was still alive in the world, still capable of touching hearts and changing lives. And he had kept his promise to her. He had shown that kindness and love really were the only things that mattered. Simon later said in interviews that Michael's audition reminded him why he fell in love with this business in the first place. It wasn't about finding the perfect voice or the most polished act. It was about finding those rare moments when human beings bare their souls and remind us all of what we're capable of when we choose love over fear. And somewhere, in a small apartment in San Francisco, an old voice recorder sits on a boy's nightstand, a testament to the fact that a mother's love never really dies. It just waits for the right moment to remind the world that even in our darkest times, we are never truly alone. That day at America's Got Talent, Michael Chen didn't just find his mother's voice. He found the courage to share her love with the world. And in doing so, he changed not just Simon Cowell, but everyone who witnessed the moment when a boy's promise to his mother reminded us all what it means to be human.